The Night You Disappeared, Chapter 1. The first lie arrived before the champagne. Evelyn watched her husband kiss another woman through the reflection of a silver ice bucket, and for one irrational second, she admired how beautifully he did it. Not greedily. Not guiltily. With tenderness. The kind reserved for funerals and first confessions. The ballroom around her glittered with old money and expensive boredom. Crystal chandeliers trembled above 100 important people pretending not to stare at the governor's son, destroying his marriage 3 weeks before election season. No one moved to stop him. That was the first thing Evelyn understood about scandal. People only look away when they already know. She kept smiling as guests drifted past in silk and diamonds and tailored black wool. Someone laughed too loudly near the orchestra. A waiter nearly dropped a tray of oysters. Across the room, her husband brushed his thumb across Celeste Laurent's bare shoulder with the absent intimacy of repetition. Not new then, worse. Practiced. You're bleeding. Evelyn turned. Nathan Vale stood beside her holding 2 champagne glasses and the expression of a man who enjoyed watching buildings burn as long as he wasn't trapped inside them. Tall, dark coat, rain still clinging to the shoulders despite the weather having cleared an hour ago. He nodded toward her hand. Only then did she realize the stem of her glass had shattered inside her grip. A thin ribbon of blood slid across her palm. Occupational hazard, she said softly. Nathan looked toward her husband. Marriage? Politics. That almost made him smile. Almost. He handed her his handkerchief instead of the champagne. White linen. Monogrammed. Expensive enough to mean he came from the kind of family that inherited sins instead of earning them. You should leave before someone photographs your face, he said. Why? Do I look heartbroken? No. His eyes lowered briefly to the blood staining the cloth between her fingers. You look dangerous. Across the ballroom, Julian finally noticed her watching. Her husband froze. Not because he'd been caught, because he hadn't expected her to survive it so elegantly. Julian Ashford had spent 10 years loving Evelyn in the way certain men preserve antique paintings proudly, carefully, and from a distance. Their marriage photographed well. That was its greatest intimacy. But Celeste looked touched. Evelyn watched panic flicker beneath Julian's composure. Tiny, merely invisible. The crack beneath the ice, good. She raised her glass toward him in a silent toast. Julian immediately disentangled himself from Celeste and started crossing the ballroom. Too late. Don't, Evelyn murmured as he approached. Her voice stopped him harder than a slap would have. Guests pretended not to listen. The orchestra kept playing. Nathan remained beside her, quiet enough to become threatening. Julian's jaw tightened. Evie, not here. She smiled gently. Evie, not here. She smiled gently. You care too much about headlines. Celeste lingered 20 feet away, pretending to examine a sculpture. She was breathtaking in the precise way Evelyn hated, soft gold hair pinned low at the neck, mouth like an apology no one believed, a dress the color of expensive cream, the kind of woman newspapers called effortless because they'd never witnessed the discipline required to become her. And yet Celeste looked afraid. Interesting. Julian lowered his voice. This isn't what you think. No, Evelyn said. It's worse. A muscle flickered in his throat. Nathan sipped his champagne, studying the room with visible amusement. You know, he said conversationally, in my experience, when people say that sentence, it usually means there are at least 3 additional crimes involved. Julian finally acknowledged him. Who the hell are you? Nathan Vale. Recognition darkened Julian's face instantly. Of course it did. Everyone in Manhattan knew Nathan Vale, the financier who ruined companies with smiling precision, the prodigal son who disappeared for 2 years after a woman overdosed in his penthouse. The man tabloids called beautiful only because monstrous was too honest for print. Nathan extended his hand anyway. Julian ignored it. How do you know my wife? Nathan glanced at Evelyn. She stepped on broken glass, he said. I introduced myself. The lies slid smoothly between them. Too smoothly. Julian noticed it too. Evelyn saw the exact moment jealousy entered the room. Not because Julian loved her deeply, because he believed she belonged to him. A photographer's flash exploded nearby. Julian immediately reached for Evelyn's waist on instinct, the polished gesture of a devoted husband. She moved away before he could touch her. The reaction was small, devastating, because now everyone saw it. Silence spread outward through the ballroom in invisible waves. Political donors paused mid-conversation. Socialites looked down into champagne they could no longer pretend to enjoy. Someone near the orchestra whispered, "Oh my God." Nathan leaned closer to Evelyn. "What are you going to do?" he asked quietly. She should have said leave him, destroy him, survive him. Instead, she heard herself ask, "How long?" Julian answered too fast. 3 months. Celeste closed her eyes, and there it was, the real answer hanging in the air between them. Evelyn looked at the woman across the room. Celeste wouldn't meet her gaze, not because she felt guilty, because she knew something worse than betrayal, something Evelyn didn't. "You should tell her," Celeste whispered. Julian went pale. Nathan's attention sharpened instantly. Evelyn felt the entire room tilt half an inch sideways. "Tell me what?" Nobody spoke. The orchestra continued its beautiful little massacre in the background. Then Julian said the sentence that split her life cleanly in two. "She knew you before I did." Chapter 2. There are silences that hum like power lines before they fall. Evelyn heard one now. It stretched across the ballroom between herself and the woman who had just shattered 10 years of memory with a single sentence. Guests still pretended not to listen, but the performance was deteriorating. Conversations thinned, smiles stiffened. Smiles stiffened. Somewhere near the bar, someone quietly sent a text that would ruin tomorrow morning for everyone involved. "She knew you before I did." Evelyn stared at Julian as though repetition might make the words less absurd. "What does that mean?" Julian opened his mouth, closed it again. For the first time in years, he looked unprepared. Nathan noticed too. Evelyn could feel it, the subtle shift in him beside her. Predators recognize panic faster than love ever could. Celeste stepped forward before Julian could speak. "It means," she said carefully, "you met me 7 years ago." "No," Evelyn replied immediately. Not defensive, instinctive, because she would have remembered her. Some women entered a room softly. Celeste Laurent altered gravity. Men watched her without realizing it. Women distrusted themselves around her. She had the face of a confession dragged out after midnight. Evelyn would have remembered. "You were drunk," Celeste continued. Julian cut in sharply. "Enough." That one word landed too fast, too frightened. Evelyn turned slowly toward her husband. "Why are you scared?" "I'm trying to protect you." Nathan laughed quietly into his champagne. All three of them looked at him. "What?" Nathan said mildly. "That line should be retired by law." Julian's voice hardened. "Stay out of this. Impossible now." Nathan glanced between them with dangerous calm. "You've already made it entertaining." Evelyn barely heard them. Something ugly had begun moving beneath her ribs. Drunk. 7 years ago. A memory brushed against her mind and vanished before she could hold it. Summer. Rain against taxi windows. A hotel elevator. Someone crying in another room? Gone. Celeste watched her too closely. "You really don't remember me," she whispered. And somehow that sounded more painful than accusation. Evelyn hated her for that. Hated the tremor beneath her voice. Hated the intimacy of strangers speaking like former lovers. Hated that Julian looked less afraid of losing his wife than of what his wife might remember. "Explain it," Evelyn said. "No," Julian replied instantly. "Yes," Celeste said at the same time. Their eyes locked. "War. Not romance, not lust. History." Nathan slowly set down his empty glass. "Now this," he murmured, "is becoming worth canceling plans for." Julian ignored him. "Celeste, stop. You already lied to her long enough. I lied to protect you too." The room went still again. Evelyn felt her pulse climb. Two. Such a small word. Such catastrophic implications. She looked between them carefully now, no longer seeing an affair but an alliance fractured open. Not husband and mistress, co-conspirators. "How do you know each other?" Evelyn asked. Neither answered quickly enough. That was answer enough. Outside the ballroom windows, Manhattan shimmered black and gold beneath the rain-slick night. Evelyn suddenly had the strange sensation that her life had already ended somewhere behind her, and she was simply arriving late to discover the body. Celeste folded her arms tightly, as if cold. We met because of you, she said quietly. Julian swore under his breath. Evelyn's heartbeat became audible in her own ears. Nathan stepped closer, not protective exactly, but attentive in the way people lean toward explosions. What did I do? Evelyn asked. Celeste looked at her for a very long time before answering. You disappeared. The sentence hit with no immediate meaning, which made it worse. Evelyn frowned. What? For 3 days. Celeste's voice remained calm, but her hands betrayed her. One thumb pressed hard into the opposite palm. Nobody knew where you were. That never happened. It did. No. Julian finally moved toward Evelyn. Evie, don't touch me. He stopped instantly. That hurt him. Good. Evelyn searched her own memory with rising desperation. She remembered charity galas and campaign dinners and magazine interviews and anniversaries celebrated in restaurants too expensive to enjoy honestly. She remembered learning how to become untouchable in public. She remembered every betrayal her husband thought invisible. But not this. Never this. You had a breakdown, Celeste said softly. Julian's expression turned murderous. Evelyn laughed once. A sharp, disbelieving sound. Careful, she said. You're starting to sound insane. But the moment the words left her mouth, another memory surfaced without warning. White sheets. The smell of antiseptic. A man's voice saying, she still thinks she's married. Evelyn's breath caught. Julian saw it happen. Panic flooded his face. And suddenly, Nathan was no longer amused. Interesting, Matt. Because Nathan Bale had spent the entire evening watching people bleed emotionally with the detached pleasure of a man at the theater, but now he was studying Evelyn differently, as though he'd finally located the hidden knife in the room. What did you do to her? Nathan asked quietly. Julian snapped. You don't know what you're talking about. No, Nathan agreed. But she doesn't either, which is usually a bad sign. Celeste looked sick now. Guilty sick, the kind that arrived years too late to save anyone. Evelyn turned toward her slowly. You said I knew you. Yes. How? Celeste's eyes filled with something unbearable, not triumph. Grief. You told me secrets, she whispered. The orchestra stopped playing. No one clapped. In the sudden silence, Evelyn heard only her own breathing. What secrets? Celeste looked at Julian before answering, and that tiny glance told Evelyn everything she needed to fear, because people look toward the person they're afraid of before telling the truth. Finally, Celeste spoke. You told me your husband was going to destroy you before he ever loved you. Chapter 3. The applause arrived 30 seconds too late, polite, confused, scattered across the ballroom like debris after impact. Evelyn barely heard it. Her body remained perfectly still, but inside her, something had begun clawing at locked doors. You're lying, she said. Celeste flinched, not because of the accusation, because she wished it were true. Julian stepped forward carefully, the way men approach wounded animals they once trained to trust them. Evie, we should go home. Home. The word almost made her smile. Their penthouse, with its museum silence and temperature-controlled wine cellar and bed sheets that smell permanently of lavender and expensive restraint. Home, where every fight happened in whispers because the staff might overhear. Home, where Julian kissed her forehead instead of her mouth once the cameras disappeared. Home, where she suddenly suspected entire years had been hidden from her. Nathan slid one hand into his pocket, watching all three of them with lethal concentration. She's not going anywhere until someone explains why she looks like she's remembering a murder. Julian's composure snapped at last. This is none of your business. Nathan's gaze remained on Evelyn. That stopped being true when she started bleeding. The sentence landed strangely. Too intimate for strangers. Evelyn noticed Julian noticing it too. Good, let him feel uncertain. Let him wonder whether she had already replaced him in her mind with someone crueler. The terrifying thing was, she might have. What breakdown? Evelyn asked quietly. Nobody answered. Julian. His jaw tightened. You were under stress. That's not an answer. You were exhausted. Still not an answer. Celeste looked away first. Coward. No worse. Protective. Evelyn suddenly realized Celeste still loved him. Not innocently, not safely, but enough to lie badly. That changed everything. Mistresses were easy to hate when they wanted victory, harder when they looked haunted by what winning cost. You said I disappeared, Evelyn continued. Where did I go? Julian exhaled slowly through his nose. Buying time. Always buying time. You checked yourself into a clinic. The word struck without warning. A physical sensation, like missing a step in the dark. No. Yes. No. You were having panic attacks. Evelyn shook her head immediately. I would remember that. Silence. That silence again. Heavy. Breathing. Wrong. And suddenly, she did remember something not clearly, but enough to make her stomach tighten. A bathroom floor cold against her cheek. Her own voice whispering, I think something's wrong with me. Then another voice answering, You just need sleep. Julian's voice. Always calm, always reasonable, always deciding reality first. Nathan spoke carefully now. Did a doctor diagnose you? Julian looked at him with open hatred. Are you enjoying yourself? Not anymore. That frightened Evelyn more than anything yet, because Nathan Vale looked like a man difficult to disturb. And now he was disturbed. Celeste moved closer slowly. Evelyn, don't. But you deserve no, Evelyn said softly. What I deserve is the truth. What you're giving me feels edited. Celeste's eyes filled instantly. There it was again. Guilt sharp enough to taste. Julian noticed Evelyn watching her, and for the first time that evening, genuine fear crossed his face. Not fear of exposure, fear of connection. As if the most dangerous thing in the room was not the affair but the possibility that these two women might finally compare versions of him. A server passed nearby, carrying fresh champagne. Nobody touched it? The orchestra resumed somewhere behind them. Quieter now, strings trembling delicately through the tension like nerves exposed beneath skin. Evelyn suddenly felt exhausted, not physically, historically, as though her marriage had become a book rewritten so many times the original plot no longer existed. She looked at Julian. When did you start sleeping with her? Evie, when? His hesitation lasted less than 2 seconds. Long enough. Celeste answered instead. Before the election. Julian closed his eyes briefly. Interesting. He wasn't angry she told the truth. He was angry she chose this truth. Evelyn nodded once. So the affair began when your campaign did. It wasn't like that. No. Her voice remained terrifyingly calm. Then explain why every woman you love arrives during moments useful to your career. Julian stared at her. Nathan, behind them, smiled slightly into his drink. Hit. Directly hit. Julian lowered his voice. You think I used you? I think you collect damaged women and call it devotion? The words hung between them like broken glass. Because they were true. Not entirely, but enough. Evelyn saw it in his face. Julian loved women most when they needed him. He built intimacy through rescue, through control disguised as tenderness. Every gift arrived attached to invisible strings. Every reassurance subtly repositioned reality around his version of events. Hadn't he once told her, you feel things too intensely to trust your memory sometimes? At the time, it sounded loving. Now it sounded surgical. Nathan watched her carefully. You're remembering. Julian rounded on him instantly. Stop talking to her like you know her. Nathan's expression cooled. No, he said softly. You're afraid I might. The air changed. Even Celeste noticed. Evelyn looked between the two men. Julian, polished, disciplined, dangerous in public ways. Nathan, reckless, unreadable, dangerous in private ones. And suddenly she understood something instinctively. These men already hated each other. Not socially. Personally. How do you know him? She asked Julian. Julian didn't answer immediately. Mistake. Nathan did. Our families ruined each other for 20 years. Your father sent mine to prison, Julian said coldly. Nathan shrugged slightly. Your father was guilty. He killed himself. And mine drank himself to death celebrating. Nathan's smile returned without warmth. Childhood was complicated. Evelyn stared. This wasn't coincidence. None of this was coincidence. The realization spread through her slowly and horribly. Nathan hadn't appeared tonight accidentally. He had recognized Julian immediately. Maybe even her. A chill moved down her spine. You knew who I was when you approached me. Nathan held her gaze. Yes, Julian swore quietly. Why? Nathan steadied her for a long moment before answering, and when he finally spoke, his voice lost all amusement. Because, he said, I met you the night you disappeared.